What is the foundation of a society? A common answer to this question revolves around the values, ideas, and myths that exist in all societies. You've heard it before: freedom and democracy for America, God and the monarchy for the English, liberty, equality, and fraternity for the French, and so on and so on. But are these ideas really what defines our society, or is there something deeper that defines these ideas? If there is something deeper, then wouldn't that be the actual foundation of any given society? German political theorist Karl Marx, who needs no introduction, has an interesting answer to this question. For Marx, society is made up of two complementary halves. At the bottom, the foundation, we have the base. Resting on top of this base, we have what Marx calls the superstructure. Base and superstructure. But what exactly does he mean by base? For Marx, the base of a society is the economic means of production. Well, you might ask, what is that? What is the means of production? The means of production refers primarily to the tools which produce the way of life for a given social body. For a primitive community, stones and sticks, fire and animal hide. For a modern society, factories, massive agricultural plots, the highway infrastructure, the internet, and anything else that a specific people need to produce the goods that they consume and subsist off of. This base and its development span from the beginning of mankind to the present day, developing gradually as technological innovations are discovered and perfected. What about the superstructure? For Marx, the superstructure refers to the ideological forms that permeate a given society, be they philosophic, religious, or political. In the era of primitive hunter-gatherer society, religion took the form of a kind of pantheism. All the different aspects of nature were personified into a specific divine being: the god of the air, the god of the sun, the god of water, the god of the wilderness, and so on. As these primitive communities came into contact with other primitive communities, this pantheism developed into polytheism, wherein multiple gods existed for multiple different tribes and peoples. This community worships Ares, this community worships Zeus, this one Athena. Later, when more and more isolated communities were brought together, we see the development of monotheistic religion, wherein there is one God who rules over all people. This is an example of the development of the superstructure. But to get to the heart of Marx's point in making this distinction, we must ask the question: what causes this development? Why do ideas change over time? As you might have already pieced together from our examples, one key factor is the development of communication and transportation technologies. As social bodies grow, their ideas develop to account for the ideas held by differing constituents within the given social body. And the mechanisms by which societies grow and expand, the aforementioned communication and transportation technology, is, as you might have guessed, a fundamental aspect of the base, the economic means of production of a society. Thus, for Marx, the development of the base leads to the development of the superstructure. Now, we mentioned before that the base develops gradually, corresponding with technological innovation and implementation. So one might expect the superstructure to do the same. For Marx, and for observable history, this isn't the case. Men are far more easily persuaded to adopt new technologies than new ideas. It is easier to convince a nomadic herder to incorporate the use of the wheel into his lifestyle than to convince him that maybe his god of the sky and his neighbor's god of the sky are more or less the same thing. So how do these changes in superstructure come about? For Marx, eventually the expansion of the base of a society develops to a point wherein it is no longer possible to reconcile the old way of thinking, the superstructure, with the new way of living. This irreconcilable contradiction can only be resolved by some kind of violent rupture, a revolution, wherein a new superstructure that is more in line with the developing base is created, codified, and becomes dominant. An example of this idea that will probably hit close to home for Americans would be the American Revolution itself. The first instances of colonization in North America were predicated on the idea that the colonized territory was part of the British Empire and under the dominion of the British Crown and the British Parliament. And insofar as these colonies could not subsist without the British, insofar as the economic base of the colonies was dependent upon Britain, the superstructure of British political authority remained intact. As the colonies expanded and developed, their reliance on the British decreased. A new base, an independent American economy, began to form. Once this base reached a point wherein its people were certain of their abilities to govern themselves, when British political authority, the superstructure of the British Empire, burdened development more so than aiding it, the colonists made the first moves towards establishing an independent state to correspond to their new independent economy. An independent American superstructure to match an independent American base. This move was opposed by the agents of the old superstructure, the British Crown, the Redcoats, so aggressively that the only way for an independent American structure to come into being was through the use of force, through the aforementioned violent rupture with the old, through revolution. This, for Marx, is the essence of historical development, a conflict between the old ways of thinking and the new ways of living, a conflict between a decaying state and a developing economy for whom that state exists only as a burden and a leech off of the dynamic potential of the new. The agents of this new, in whatever form it takes for the time period in question, are those whom Marx calls communists. Yes, you heard that right. By the logic of this writing, the founding fathers of America are in the same category as Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong. A troubling idea for many caught up in Cold War era anti-communism, but one which, even if you find yourself in disagreement with, it would serve us well to contemplate, especially in light of a growing desire for change and a growing dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. I implore those listening to take these ideas in with an open mind and to seriously consider them. Try to make arguments against them, criticize them to the best of your abilities, and maybe even see what the implications of your accepting them as true would be. As always, thank you for your time. May we all know more today than we did yesterday. God bless.